When you hear the name Tom Hanks enter a conversation, your mind will likely wander off to your own personal favorite performance given by the legendary thespian. Perhaps you remember a sweet and joyous childhood, enhanced by a talking cowboy called Woody and his pals in Toy Story. Maybe you simply can't stop yourself from screaming "Wilson" at the top of your lungs, much like Chuck Nolan in Castaway. Or you might just shed a tear at the thought of Captain John H. Miller's death in Saving Private Ryan. Away from those and many more outstanding turns though, everyone's favorite Tom very nearly appeared in a number of other all-time greats, and a few all-time flops, which likely would have had a huge impact on his now iconic career. For better or for worse. I'm Gareth from WhatCulture.com, and here is every movie role Tom Hanks turned down. Number 15, Groundhog Day, Phil Connors. With his one-of-a-kind charm and untouchable dry sense of humor, Bill Murray burst onto the scene in the early 80s, and by the end of the decade he was starring in the likes of Scrooged and the sequel to a hugely successful Ghostbusters film. However, one of his most famous roles, that of Phil Connors in Harold Ramis's 1993 comedy classic Groundhog Day, very nearly went to another star on the rise. Ramis has gone on record to state that Hanks was his first choice going into the project. However, Hanks later told Ramis that audiences would have been sitting there waiting for me to become nice, because I always play nice. But Bill's such a miserable SOB on and off screen, you didn't know what was gonna happen. He's not wrong, you know. Number 14, When Harry Met Sally, Harry Burns. With the outstanding chemistry of Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan on show throughout, 1989's When Harry Met Sally boasts some of the finest moments in rom-com history, including that diner scene. I'll have what she's having. Yet Mr. Crystal was not, in fact, the only name linked to the part of Harry Burns. Before Crystal was eventually offered the role, Tom Hanks actually passed up on the opportunity to star opposite Meg Ryan, something he would later do in Joe vs. the Volcano, Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, and Ithaca, due to him feeling as though the material was too lightweight for his liking. Charming. Number 13, The Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne. When putting together the 1994 cinematic adaptation of Stephen King's novella, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont offered the leading part of Andy Dufresne to many of the usual suspects. Tom Cruise, Kevin Costner, and of course the main man himself, Tom Hanks, were all presented the role, but declined for various reasons. Cruise wasn't interested in being directed by a fairly new director, Costner had obtained the lead in Waterworld, and Hanks had decided to star in Forrest Gump instead. As we know, Hanks went on to secure his second Academy Award win for his performance as Forrest Gump, and Tim Robbins was ultimately cast in the role of Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption, which is currently ranked as the #1 top-rated movie on IMDb. So this ended up being a wise move for the pair of them. Number 12, Speed, Jack Traven. Tom Hanks has successfully lent himself to pretty much every genre imaginable over the years, and for the most part he's excelled in all of them. However, when it comes to straight-up thriller-minute action flicks, Hanks isn't usually the first name on a movie studio's lips. That still didn't stop director Jon de Bont considering the Oscar winner for the role of Officer Jack Traven in his intense 1994 feature about a bus set to blow up should its speed drop below 50 miles per hour. Yet again though, the Toms, Cruise and Hanks turned down the role, paving the way for Keanu Reeves to tackle the armed bus instead. Number 11, Nixon, Richard Nixon. Now, this one is rather unique, as Tom Hanks was actually attached to play a version of President Richard Nixon on the big screen, in The Passion of Richard Nixon. However, the project unfortunately didn't find its way to the cinema in the end. But when Oliver Stone was eventually tasked with bringing the 37th US president's story to life, the legendary Platoon and Wall Street director was well aware of Hanks' previous attachment to the role, and approached him about appearing in his 1995 project. Hanks ultimately decided the role just wasn't for him at that time, and Anthony Hopkins was instead brought in to play the distinct figure in Stone's Nixon film. Number 10. Gangs of New York, Bill the Butcher Cutting. Though it's hard to imagine anyone other than the electrifying Daniel Day-Lewis hurling knives and slicing up pigs in Martin Scorsese's 2002 epic Gangs of New York, there was a time when the role of Bill the Butcher Cutting very nearly ended up being played by another legendary name. According to Scorsese, Tom Hanks was a big fan of the script that had been put together. He just couldn't commit to the project due to his leading role in Sam Mendes' Road to Perdition. So with Day-Lewis in the driver's seat, Bill the Butcher was added to the Englishman's illustrious back catalogue of deeply complex and compelling characters, earning the actor another Academy Award for Best Actor nomination. Number 9. Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire. He's been mentioned a few times already on this list as a fellow decliner of roles. But now we find ourselves in a situation where Tom Cruise was very nearly deprived of one of his most memorable performances due to one Tom Hanks. Writer-director Cameron Crowe originally wrote the screenplay for Jerry Maguire with none other than the star of this list in mind. However, by the time he'd finished the script, Hanks was no longer in a position to take the role. Crowe explained to Empire magazine in 1997, "I took so long doing the script that Hanks was no longer a 35-year-old man. By the time he got the script, he was almost 40 and had 2 Academy Awards and wanted to direct." As we all know, Cruise eventually went on to knock Maguire out of the park and produced yet another iconic display, which included the ever-quotable "Show me the money" moment. Number 8. Jack Powell. Another role Hanks was seen as the number one choice for was a part oddly similar to one he'd already played before, that of what appears to be a child trapped inside of a man's body. It was actually Hanks' performance in Penny Marshall's Big which made him director Francis Ford Coppola's first choice for the role of Jack Powell in his 1996 feature about a boy who ages 4 times faster than usual. However, the actor clearly didn't feel like retreading old ground by playing a similar role again. So this meant that Robin Williams was eventually brought in to play the lead in Jack. Strangely enough though, Williams was also one of the names passed up on when it came to casting Hank's role of Josh Baskin in Big. Number 7. The Thin Red Line, Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Tall. Though the legendary thespian would eventually commit himself to Steven Spielberg's standard-bearing World War II drama Saving Private Ryan, he was also courted to star in another wartime project going into production around the same time. Before eventually landing on Nick Nolte, Terrence Malick wanted Hanks to play the role of Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Tall in his very own star-studded war drama. However, Hanks had already committed to Spielberg's movie, so he had to politely decline Malick's offer. Even though The Thin Red Line still went on to be a largely acclaimed movie, earning a number of Academy Award nominations, Saving Private Ryan took home 5 Oscars, including Best Director for Steven Spielberg, and secured Hanks yet another nomination for Best Actor. Number 6. Big, Josh Baskin. Nope, that most definitely is not a typo. The star of one of the most well-known dramedies of all time actually wasn't originally available to play the part of Josh Baskin in Big, due to scheduling conflicts. Hanks was filming the likes of Dragnet and Punchline at the time, so Robert De Niro was instead positioned as the actor for the job. However, the Taxi Driver and Raging Bull star's wage demands were seen as a bit too high, so he was soon dropped as a potential Baskin. Other names such as Kevin Costner, John Travolta, and Sean Penn were also considered, but Penny Marshall's first choice thankfully became available yet again before the project began shooting, so Hanks was finally brought back in. Thank goodness. Number 5. Primary Colors, Jack Stanton. Tom Hanks is probably one of the few people on planet Earth who can honestly get away with the excuse of being too busy to sign on for a particular project. I mean, just look at the amount of films he had under his belt by the time he decided to branch out into directing in 1996. However, when Hanks fell back on this reasoning when backing out of Mike Nichols' Primary Colors, the press didn't exactly buy it, and felt this decision was actually made due to his friendship with President Bill Clinton. The film was an adaptation of the novel Primary Colors, A Novel of Politics, which itself was a fictional story inspired by Clinton's first presidential campaign in 1992. Yet Hanks still stuck to his story and simply confessed that he told Nichols, life has caught up with me. After staring at his schedule and realizing he was due to shoot Saving Private Ryan and executive produce the series From the Moon to the Earth on HBO, John Travolta went on to star as Jack Stanton instead, with his Clinton-esque performance earning him plenty of plaudits once the feature landed on the big screen. Number 4. The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. Unknown role. With a career spanning 4 decades, Tom Hanks has understandably worked with a ton of different directors over the years. However, one name the star has never been directed by desperately tried to secure Hanks' services for a film by the name of The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. According to the director of Scorpion, Woody Allen, Hanks was offered the chance to star in his 2001 flick but turned down the role. The director seemed to allude to both Hanks and Robert De Niro turning their noses up at the fees offered to them for their services. Telling Empire, "There are plenty of actors and actresses that have said, even after saying I'm dying to work with you so I'd do anything, that they're not available or they can't work for the pay I'm offering, because they have a chance to make a movie for $8 million or $10 million and they need the money." Ultimately, the feature ended up receiving mixed reviews upon its release, and Allen himself classed the project as one of his worst features. So looks like a bullet dodged if you ask me. Number 3. Batman Forever, Batman/Bruce Wayne. In the wake of Michael Keaton's decision to step down as the Caped Crusader following 2 successful outings under Tim Burton, Warner Brothers were tasked with filling some rather large bat boots before Batman Forever was made a reality. As you'd expect, every major leading man of the 90s was pretty much shortlisted for the role of Bruce Wayne/Batman. Among this star-studded shortlist was none other than your boy Tom Hanks. Yet Hanks clearly decided this just wasn't the right move for him at the time, and actually hasn't felt the need to dip his toe into the superhero genre at any point in his storied career. Yet. Judging by how Batman Forever was received by fans and critics alike, Hanks definitely made the right call to dodge this particular batarang. But it's surely only a matter of time before this megastar makes his super debut, right? Number 2. Star Trek First Contact, Zephram Cochrane. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point that Tom Hanks is a humongous Star Trek nerd. The star once confessed to Graham Norton that he was incredibly jealous of everyone aboard the Enterprise whenever he watched the show and movies. So it may come as a surprise to learn that Hanks has actually had the opportunity to be part of a Star Trek movie in his career, but unfortunately had to turn down the project. Director Jonathan Frakes and the writers behind Star Trek First Contact had written their version of Zephram Cochrane with James Cromwell in mind. However, the studio were more interested in Hanks taking the role. But in the end, the Trekkie had to decline due to being tied up with his directorial debut. That thing you do. Will we ever see Tom Hanks boldly go? Only time will tell. Number 1. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Mr. Rogers. Here we have the most recent turning down of a role on this list. Tom Hanks may have eventually gone on to play Fred Rogers in 2019's A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but there was a time when he just wasn't that excited by the project as a whole. Speaking to CBS this morning, Hanks confessed that he read the initial screenplay for the film before anybody was attached to make the feature, and didn't know what it was at that moment in time, although he did admit that this script wasn't as specific as the one he would wind up agreeing to help bring to life in the end. Yet once Hanks found out that Marielle Heller was on board to direct the film, and after he'd studied her previous work on Diary of a Teenage Girl, he soon decided to reconsider his stance on the role of Mr. Rogers. This ended up being an excellent decision made by the veteran thespian, as he was yet again nominated for an Academy Award for his performance, this time for Best Supporting Actor. Like a fine wine, Mr. Hanks just gets better with age. And that's every movie role Tom Hanks turned down. Did we miss any? Let us know all about them in the comments section below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button. Also, be sure to head on over to whatculture.com and click on some more awesome articles just like the one this video is based on. I've been Gareth from whatculture.com, thank you very much for watching, and I'm sure I'll see you very, very soon.